Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant. We welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Later, Brigitte Blom from the Prichard Committee talks about both the encouraging and concerning trends in some new testing of the school children here in Kentucky and across the country. That's later. But first, prices remain high and retailers are also figuring out the new landscape with possible tariffs on some merchandise. The Kentucky Retail Federation has represented businesses from drugstores to hardware to clothing outlets for decades. Times are changing with more Kentuckians ordering their gifts and everyday needs online, but retailers support more than 700,000 Kentucky jobs and pay out more than $9 billion in wages and collect nearly $3 billion in state sales tax. Steve McClain is Director of Communications and Public Affairs for the Kentucky Retail Federation. He's with us. Thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Looking at some numbers, there was record holiday spending in the country, $994 billion. Are Kentucky retailers seeing that strong trend as well?
You know, from what we heard from our members was lots of them did say that they saw more people coming in to stores. So it kind of caught, I think, some people, even, you know, the national experts, kind of by surprise. It beat their estimates of what they were forecasting. So it was a good year for that.
Another surprise, the inflation continues to be an issue out there. Are Kentucky retailers navigating the high prices? Are they sort of caught in the middle of having to make the decisions about passing those costs directly on or trying to absorb in some way?
It is, and you know, caught in the middle is a good way to say it, because there are so many things, outside forces that retailers have no control over that affects prices. So a lot of what we saw last year was retailers, particularly with the incoming administration and some of the things that were said, they started ordering ahead products. So they were trying to get ahead of maybe some possible tariffs if those went into effect. But they are. It is a hard. They want to serve their customers, give them the best value that they have. But there are so many forces outside. You look at. There's so much discussion right now on the price of eggs in grocery stores and all, but that is brought on by an avian flu outbreak that really no one has any real control over on that until supply catches back up with the demand on that. But you saw retailers have been very strategic, looking at what their customers want, trying to bring in the right mix of products that they are asking for. When you look at I think what we've seen over the since COVID and beyond is how important retail and the consumers are to the economy. I mean, it's very much a consumer-driven economy. So they have worked at trying to meet the consumers where they are. We've seen consumers, yes, spending continues, but what we saw particularly during the holidays, they spread that buying out over several months, and they move kind of what they're buying around from month to month to make sure that they're buying the necessities, and then putting some, what we saw was them putting some aside to do that holiday shopping or whatever that they're looking for.
There's such a shift in the landscape out there, and you represent both the big delivery services like Amazon and the Main Street retailers. They both have to be in each other's space a little bit, certainly with an online presence. But is there a niche still for everybody?
Oh yeah, there's definitely a niche. We saw some numbers over the recent holiday season that traffic picked back up in stores. We're seeing, and it's kind of interesting, you know, everyone talks about the younger generations being so tech savvy, but we also saw them going into the stores some. And what we're seeing a lot is people are doing research online, kind of making their decisions based on what they're reading on product reviews or looking, and then they're going to the store physically and looking at the product. I know there were several some local retailers that I know where I live in Georgetown that said they thought that felt like they saw more people actually coming into the store this holiday season than in recent ones.
Kentucky's workforce participation rate is less than 58%, so we hear so much about a workforce shortage out there. We know that is big in some areas. Do retailers face a challenge in staffing their stores, especially given that they have to have those extensive hours to be there for the customers, and work those traditional schedules?
That is, yes, retailers have these same issues almost every other sector has in getting enough workers. And it is, you've got that extensive hours and all. And sometimes that attracts people because some people may want to work earlier in the day or later at night. One thing that the Federation, we have called the Kentucky Retail Institute. And one thing that we have been working on is trying to get out, particularly to high school students. We've done a couple of events with them the last couple of years. There's more to retail than just the checkout clerk. There's logistics, there's security, there's marketing. So we've been working, and some of our members have been connecting with those high school students, showing that there is more to retail than that, and trying to hopefully attract some folks into that have an interest in shipping logistics and things like that.
Opportunity to learn some soft skills and customer skills as well. All right, let's talk just a little bit about some of the issues coming up in the state legislature. I know there's one bill that you're watching very carefully having to do with gift card fraud, which is a big concern here in Kentucky.
It is. Since last fall, there have been two major, an indictment in Lexington, and there was an arrest in Louisville of gift card fraud. Each case was about $1 million in gift card fraud. So what we have done, we got a bill filed this week on gift card fraud to strengthen the laws to cover that. There really wasn't any language in the bill, in the state law, covering gift card fraud and tampering. So we've got a bill that's been filed this week that we're working on getting moved that puts some felony teeth behind that crime.
Yeah. What would you have folks out there watching today, what would your members have them know about what it is like these days to operate a retail operation and to try to, satisfy the customers and stay in business and make some money at it?
Yeah, it is our members would say it's a challenging environment, but it is one that they enjoy. It is very fluid. You have to be pretty nimble to move from issue to issue. Go back to COVID. It feels like it's been a decade ago, but it really hadn't. But just that switch from serving customers that couldn't come into the store to meeting them online, and just being nimble. And there are so many things. It's not just gift card fraud, but organized retail crime is a growing concern in the state that we're looking at. Again, workforce is doing that. Getting, the logistics shortages. I think people sometimes think it's real easy, stuff just appears on the shelves, but there's the transportation aspect of it. So you gotta navigate, the trucks coming in, and some days you may get half of what you were ordering to come in. And so I think one thing is being kind to each other, just being pleasant with each other as you're shopping and with the staff as they're doing things. I know there's been a lot of focus with that organized retail crime. People, a lot more things being locked up, and you have to get, and there's some going back and forth on whether or not that's good. You're seeing some businesses going away from that, but there was a reason to do this because so much merchandise was just walking out the door with that. And those are costs that ends up being passed on eventually to the consumer.
Yeah. Steve, thank you for coming by. We appreciate you kind of give us an update of the landscape of retail out there.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It is.
Because everybody's in and out of those stores,
right.
but they don't always know how they, they operate.
There's so much that happens behind the scenes to get that there, and it's a fascinating business and business to be in and represent.
Well said. Thank you. Stay with us, everybody. We're coming back on Kentucky Newsmakers with Brigitte Blom from the Prichard Committee for Academic Excellence next right here. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers from WKYT. Kentucky's national ranking report for education called Big Bold Future was recently released. It's a mixed bag for Kentucky students. There's good news, but there are also some troubling indicators. After the pandemic, there was a big slip in scores. Students are still not back to the 2019 reading and math levels. And in some cases, Kentucky has declined in rankings among the 50 states. The Prichard Committee for Academic Excellence is calling for an all-out effort to help make improvements. Brigitte Blom is president and CEO of the Prichard Committee for Academic Excellence and joins us now. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Thank you. These numbers obviously show challenges. Your report says, bluntly, the new evidence is troubling. What are the biggest concerns?
Well, there are areas where we've really never risen to the middle and above in indicators. One of those that's troubling particularly now is post-secondary enrollment. So while we've made great strides as a state increasing 4-year degrees and 2-year degrees, students are not enrolling like they did before COVID. And there are a variety of reasons for that. But if young people are not enrolling in post-secondary, they're also not completing post-secondary. And moving our ranking to the middle of the nation and above in post-secondary attainment is one of the ways the state can move forward from an economic development standpoint and a median household income standpoint.
Because salaries are higher and the taxes
salaries
they pay
are higher. With higher educated population, you attract different types of businesses to the state that pay higher wages. You have more of a research and development environment. Those things are important, and Kentucky continues to lag the nation, though we've made great strides. It's actually also the other side of the coin is a real bright spot that we're now 27th in the nation for graduation from 4-year institutions. And that's a tribute to the last about 5 or 6 years of work at the state level, performance-based funding for post-secondary institutions that's allowed us to move into that top third of the nation.
So if they go, they're committed and they graduate generally, right?
That's right. And the performance-based funding model, which will actually be a discussion in this legislative session, is one of the policies that I think helped ensure that students had the success, the supports for success. Once they entered post-secondary, they were supported to complete. And we're seeing that policy prove positive.
K through 12, we know that Kentucky has done somewhat well in making up ground after COVID, but our numbers, again, were very challenging going into COVID.
Right.
So we're still, you make some progress, but you need much more.
That's right. And that's one of the reasons a report like this, Bill, is so important, because we are able to look at trends over time and show to the state and to citizens in the state, here's where we're making improvements, here's where we've hit a plateau or we're starting to decline, here's where we're picking up again and making progress once again, and maybe why that's happening. So a great example of that is 4th grade reading. So for a state that in the 1980s was bottom of the rankings in literacy, by 2015 we'd risen to 8th in the nation in 4th grade reading on NAEP, our nation's assessment of education progress. Right before COVID, we started to see that ranking drop. And by after COVID, we dropped back down to 29th in the nation in 4th grade reading. So, that's a call to action.
Yeah.
What we've seen in the most recent NAEP release, which was 2 weeks ago, is Kentucky's risen back up to 12th in the nation. And so that's a tribute to raising the flag that we've got an issue here, and folks doubling down, communities, schools, families, as well as policymakers, with the passage of the Read to Succeed Act a few years ago.
Absenteeism is a problem nationwide. We know that, and many school personnel say there's just not much they can do if students are not there. And we know that's an issue in Kentucky, as it is nationwide.
Yeah, unfortunately, COVID said to all of us, young people, adults, that we can do lots of things from home, and that being in school, maybe being at work, is not as important as we thought it was pre-COVID. So that's a big problem for school and for education outcomes. We see some promising indicators in some schools in the state, part of our community schools initiative that we have at the Prichard Committee, where they are stemming the tide on chronic absenteeism. It's dropping significantly because of strategies that they've put in place.
What works?
Many of those are grounded in relationship. So if a student is chronically absent, there's a systemic, a family, a community issue that needs to be understood and remedied to get that child back into school regularly. It tends to be a very different issue if a student is chronically absent in elementary school versus a student who's chronically absent in high school. And so our schools are really doubling down in relationships with parents, relationships with students, getting out to better understand root cause, and getting these young people back into the classroom.
Brigitte, I hear you saying that really that connection between the schools and the public, whether it's parents or others who can have an interest in schools and perhaps do something for schools even if they don't have children in the system,
That's exactly
is important.
Right. Yep, without a doubt. And all of these indicators that we release, this is not just a school problem. This is an everybody problem, and real improvement happens at the local level. While policies in Frankfurt are important, they can be positive, they can be net negative sometimes. They're important, but where the rubber really meets the road is in our communities. And it's not about our schools only, 7 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, 9 months of the year. It's about our communities being at the table in partnership with our schools, families being in partnership with educators, having a community commitment to improving education outcomes, whether it's 3 moms in the coffee shop who want to do something about kindergarten readiness for their brownie troop or their Sunday school, or it's the entire Rotary Club that decides it's going to raise money and deeply invest in getting high schoolers off to a successful post-high school pathway. That's where the real improvement happens. And coupled with our national rankings report that we released 2 weeks ago, just today we released our community profile. So we have these for all 171 school districts in the state, designed for the community to better understand how are we doing on a path to a larger life for our neighbors, for our community members.
And that takes into account a lot of metrics, right?
A lot of metrics, from kindergarten readiness all the way through post-secondary attainment, understanding how we're doing for different populations in our community, and also understanding the context within which the community is working. So an understanding of socioeconomics and health indicators, all packed into 4 pages, designed not for educators, but designed for lay people, for
How can
community
people
members.
get their hands on that if they're...
On the Prichard Committee's website at prichardcommittee.org, all 171 school districts.
So, we get engaged when there's a big battle, a political issue out there, like, for instance, the school choice amendment that was up and was soundly rejected in Kentucky schools, although there is that ongoing discussion about options for students and all of that. Do you expect that to continue as an issue in the landscape?
What we expect to see from legislators is an emphasis on accountability for education outcomes, and that showing itself in questions that they have around how we are or are not improving literacy and numeracy rates, and how they, the General Assembly, are holding schools accountable for those outcomes, and frankly, for return on investment for our collective taxpayer dollars. Even when we were 8th in the nation in 4th grade reading, we were still leaving about half of our 4th graders behind, not reaching the proficiency standards that we've set as a state. So even when we're top tier of the nation, we have a lot to do, and that's commentary not so much on Kentucky, but commentary on the nation writ large.
Kentucky has a shortfall in SEEK money, the formula that funds local school districts. It could be as much as $40 million, and the Education Commissioner says that may require cuts in schools.
And we're already seeing, I think it was yesterday that Fayette County announced they were cutting $640,000, I believe, from their budget to respond to those cuts. So that's going to be tough for school districts. Layer on top of that the uncertainty at the federal level of what's happening with various grants and things that may be coming in to school district budgets. Title I, which is special education, which also is federal dollars coming in through the Department of Education to school districts. There's a lot of uncertainty right now.
Does the committee take a position, or do you have some kind of strategy in dealing with if there is to be no more U.S. Department of Education?
Well, what we understand is if there would be no more U.S. Department of Education, the federal government would likely respond to states through a block grant that would provide funding to states similar to the way child care is handled now. There are always trade-offs in any policy response, so we'll have to be cognizant of what those trade-offs might be and ensure that the Kentucky Department of Education and the General Assembly is positioned to direct those monies where they are most needed.
The Education Commissioner, Robbie Fletcher, also acknowledges that Kentucky may need to take a closer look at how it does fund schools. Maybe look at this SEEK formula, the average daily attendance that's used so prominently as well. Property values uneven around the state. And local districts can very rarely pass these nickel taxes, which can go for facility improvements, new buildings, and so on. Changes would require, though, a mind shift in Kentucky, right, as to how we fund our schools.
Well, the SEEK formula was a forerunner in the nation for committing to adequacy of funding and equitable funding, particularly between rural and urban areas. So when we see low property wealth, often in rural areas relative to urban, the SEEK formula was designed to level the playing field and close that gap in funding. We are hearing that legislators are interested in looking again at the SEEK formula and figuring out how they fund schools. We don't know what that will look like yet. There are a lot of states who have followed Kentucky and a number in just the last 5 to 7 years who have looked at their funding model. So I think we're probably at a point where we could learn from what other states have done, grounded in our original commitment to ensuring all schools and districts across the state have adequate resources to educate our young people, because after all, we are one state and we will grow as one state, not as individual regions, and that will be important.
The Prichard Committee also recently released a meaningful diploma employer survey, and are schools producing students that who have the skills that employers are looking for?
Well, our schools are trying, for sure.
Okay.
And there are a number.
The effort is there.
The
right?
effort is there. We're seeing bright spots across the state where schools have embraced more dual credit opportunities, more experiential learning in career pathways, those sorts of things. And that's a good thing. What we've said for a number of years is if we look at the graduation rate and we look at the readiness rate, however that's measured, and it changes every so many years, however it's measured, we are graduating far more students than we can show are ready for their next steps after high school. And we must close that gap to ensure, as we say, a meaningful high school diploma, that the diploma is in fact evidence of readiness and likely success post-high school. Some of the things that we know we need to include in the diploma is something we call durable skills. So it's not only the content mastery that we expect students to have in mathematics, reading, science, civics education, how to engage in their community, but it's also their approaches to learning and to work. So think problem solving, creativity, communication skills, goal setting, initiative, those sorts of things. And students are actually learning those skills and competencies through their formative years, whether in school or in 4-H programs, in Boy Scouts programs, Girl Scouts programs, but they may not know that's part of what they're developing. So what we're pushing is let's really bake that into the cake more and help students and parents understand that's part of what a young person needs to develop to fill the jobs of today and be the job creators of Kentucky's future.
With so many options out there, and maybe that answers the question, why is it so difficult these days for students and young people to kind of pick a direction? It seems that so many, are at 20 years old and just don't know which way to turn.
Yeah, and that may be above my pay grade.
Yeah.
We might need to ask a few, 18, 19, 20, 20-year-olds, what is causing them to be so uncertain? Because you're right, I've watched my own children, struggle with choosing a career path. But I think it's important, again, that our economy is changing so rapidly. Think of the rise of artificial intelligence just over the last couple years. It would be really hard for us to project, even 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road, what the workforce is going to need and what the job market is going to demand. So I think it's ever more important that our students have a basketful, if you will, of transferable, durable skills for the future that will set them up for success wherever they land.
And realize they'll probably have to make a lot of changes through their careers,
That's right.
The days of 20 and 30, 40-year
Yeah.
careers are not, you don't see a lot of that these days.
You don't see a lot of that. We don't see individuals retiring from one profession.
Quickly, snow and ice and flooding have all caused issues for districts. Some have missed over 20 days already. Some are out of NTI days. Some want more. That's a tough issue for the legislature, isn't it?
Yes, I think NTI days, non-traditional instruction, which is what NTI stands for, is always challenging. Challenging for legislators because what we legislate is the number of days and hours that students and teachers are in the building. What ultimately we want is outcomes no matter how a young person is learning. I think what we realized through the COVID years is while some were able to deliver non-traditional learning, digital-based learning, Zoom learning, well, others were not able to deliver it so well, and some students learn that way and others don't, just like we do as adults. Yeah. So that's an area where I think we have a lot to learn as we move into the future, and again, things are changing so quickly.
Aren't they though? Brigitte, thanks for coming. We appreciate you as always. And
Thank you.
Folks want more information, again, the Prichard Committee's website is where to go.
That's right.
All right, everybody, we'll be back and wrap up Kentucky Newsmakers in a moment. All right, we've been working ahead as the legislative session is going on, and Senate President Robert Stivers is a scheduled guest next week. We'll also hear from Eric Frankel from Bluegrass Airport. That's Kentucky Newsmakers for this week. Thank you for joining us. Make it a good week ahead.